Okay, so I welcome everyone to tonight's special meeting of Imagine Girdwood. It's 6:03 p.m. Alaska time. So tonight, what we're going to be focusing on is looking at the public comments to the draft land use maps, and I think we may review some responses, but we're also going to be discussing some of the topics where there wasn't necessarily clarity or there wasn't necessarily a clear consensus. So I will just briefly read our mission statement so we can all be aligned. The mission is to guide Girdwood land use, creating a framework for the future of Girdwood. And the mission of Imagine Girdwood is to fund a complete, transparent, inclusive review of the Girdwood Comprehensive Plan to guide Girdwood land use in an orderly and understandable process that is respectful of all views. So I'm sure tonight we'll all be respectful of all views. And hopefully the process will be understandable. So we call to order. I would like to go through the introductions. There's quite a few people on. So Holly, do you want to take this and call people as we go through?
I can absolutely do that.
Thank you.
We'll start with Mitch.
Oh, hello. I'm Mitch Roth. I'm a member at large on the Imagine Girdwood board.
Okay, we'll go to Chase next.
Good evening, Chase Berenson, a Girdwood resident. Happy to see how this is progressing. Thank you.
Thanks, Chase. We'll go to Betsy next.
Hi, I'm Betsy. I'm just a community member.
Barbara, we'll go to you next. Welcome back.
Actually, I'm in Sun Valley right now, but Paul and I are here and interested in what's going on.
Okay. We'll go to Carolyn next.
Hey, hi, Carolyn and Ralph's here too. We're just Girdwood residents, very interested in this. Thanks.
Debbie.
Hi, I'm Debbie, just also interested community member from Girdwood.
Okay, we'll go to Doug.
Sorry, can I just quickly interrupt? Debbie, I see it now. Sorry, I couldn't see your last name. I see it now. Thank you.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, hi, I'm Doug. I'm just a community member interested in what's going on, listening in. Thank you.
Erin.
Sorry, I lost myself. Imagine Girdwood current treasurer.
Emma.
Hi there. Just a Girdwood resident, just interested in listening in.
Okay. So, Burdick Nordwood Ski Club, is that you, Deb?
Muting. There we go. Yep, that's Deb Essex here, Girdwood residents. Thanks.
Heather.
Heather and Mike Durchie, residents of Girdwood, interested community members.
Okay, who is calling in this evening on iPad 2?
Hi, this is Lori Trick. I'm here, a Girdwood local, longtime resident, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks, Lori. Jonas.
Hi, this is Julianne Mark Jonas.
Kirk.
Good evening. This is Kirk Hessel, resident and business owner. Happy to participate.
Hi, Kirk. Okay, you're up, Crystal.
Crystal Hoke, Girdwood resident.
Mark?
Hi, this is Mark Eisman. I'm the Anchorage area planner for DOT. It's been a while since I checked in, so I wanted to stop in tonight. It's good to see there's all this participation too. It's great.
Good to see you, Mark. Okay, we'll go to you next, Mike.
Mike Edgington, I'm Secretary of Imagine Girdwood.
And then the person who is Willem.
Hi, yeah, this is Will Laurie. I'm the development manager for Alyeska Resort, just listening in.
Okay, I think I got all the community members. Oh, no, Michelle.
Hi, can you hear me now?
I can, Michelle.
Okay, Michelle Tenney, community resident.
Okay. Now we'll go to project team members on the phone tonight. We'll go to Daniel first.
Hi, everybody. This is Daniel McKenna Foster. I'm a long-range planner for the municipality.
Bree.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bree Kiefer. I'm a landscape architect at Huddle.
And Peyton.
Hi, I'm Peyton. I'm also a landscape designer at Huddle.
And most of you know me. I'm Holly Spoth Torres. I'm the owner at Huddle. Did I get everyone? I think I did it. Okay. All right.
Thank you, everyone. It's weird to say it now, but if anyone notices people who join, it would be great if they can give an introduction as we go through. So if you notice it, or if you've joined since we've done the intro, we keep a record of who's attending each meetings because in order to vote, you have to have attended one meeting in the last 12 or last 6 months. So by keeping that record, it makes sure we've got the up-to-date voting list. Okay, so introductions and welcome. We'll go through agenda approval. I'll entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
This is Erin. I move to approve.
Thank you, Erin. Can I get a second, please?
This is Carolyn. I approve.
Thank you, Carolyn. So I will do this by assent. So does anybody object to approving tonight's agenda? I'm not hearing any objection, so we will consider that approved. Now we'll move on to minutes approval. We didn't have the November 29th minutes up to date at the last meeting, so if you can hope these are, I noticed they weren't earlier today, so there we go. These were the minutes from the last meeting. I should make the officer and director reports red. If anyone who was at that meeting has an opportunity to just quickly glance through them. And again, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the 29th of November. We also have a recording online, so the last several meetings we've been putting the YouTube recording, or we're putting full recording and video on YouTube.
Can you just scroll down, Mike, so I can see the end of it?
This is Mitch. I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Mitch. And if we can get a second.
I'll second. This is Erin.
Thank you, Erin. And again, we'll do this by consent. So if anyone who was in the meeting disagrees, say so now. I'm not seeing any disagreements, so we will consider that passed by assent. And now we'll move on. This is I think the last piece of plumbing. We'll move on to the minutes from our last meeting, which was December the 20th. I'm making you work hard, Holly.
Whoa. There you go.
This was up, definitely working okay when I checked it yesterday, so it's been up for at least a day. Could be longer than that. Okay, so again, if anyone who's in the meeting would like to move to accept these minutes.
This is Erin. I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Erin. Again, I'm looking for a second.
This is Mitch. I'll second.
Thank you very much, Mitch. And again, if there's any disagreement, say so now. Not hearing or seeing anything, so we will consider those passed by assent. Okay, if we can go back to the agenda. Excellent. We would normally have a one item here to accept any written comments that have come through since the last meeting. We haven't received any written comments since the last meeting, so we can skip that. We'll move on to officer and director reports. Amanda apologizes for not being here. She's on a Avalanche Pro course. She should be here, she said, around 6:30, maybe a little later. She may wish to give a report then. I'll give a quick secretary report. As I said, I've been updating, I've been putting the recordings on YouTube, and we're actually getting a few people watching them. So that's either people who didn't make the meeting, or maybe people who did make the meeting and enjoyed it so much they're watching it again. But they're on the YouTube channel, and we've put in we've got other extracts as well from different meetings when there's a presentation or something else we want to share easily. I do have a task to add some more useful information to the website. I'm going to hassle Holly for a couple of bits and pieces that we're going to work on together, and we'll have that hopefully by the end of the month, or at least our next meeting on the 24th. Any other reports? Erin, would you like to say something as treasurer?
I'll just say that the December invoice from Huddle for $73.95 was put out to be paid, I think, a couple days ago. I think a check was in the mail. I don't know if Holly's received it or not.
I got it.
Okay, so I think we're up to date on that.
Excellent, thank you. Ed or Mitch, do you have anything? I don't think Ed's on at the moment. Mitch, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to item number 5, which is really Holly will take over.
Yeah, I will start, but before I do, I just admitted an iPhone to the meeting. If you'd like to introduce yourself before we get going, that would be great. Okay, well, when you're ready to introduce yourself, if you wish to let us know.
Yeah, I think the name is iPhone 158, it says, if that helps.
One more. Kaylee just joined too. Kaylee, if you want to introduce yourself. Okay.
There we go.
iPhone.
Okay.
iPhone, go ahead.
This is Larry Daniels. Is the meeting only on Zoom?
Yeah, there is a call-in number too, but we're not in person, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, okay. I've just been driving around Girdwood looking for the meeting. Okay. Thanks.
We're in the cloud, Larry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Kaylee, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, Kaylee Harrison. Apologies, you caught me with a cup of tea, so hey.
Hey.
I'm representing myself.
Okay, thanks for doing that, everyone. Okay, so tonight is intended to be a little bit more discussion-oriented and participatory than the past few meetings have been, including even the public meeting. So we received a boatload of comments, you know that. We spent a lot of time cataloging and organizing the comments. And I'm not going to go through that again tonight. We've gone through that twice already at the past 2 meetings. If you're interested in really digging into how we did that and how you can use that tool and continue to review it in the future, go to your website and review those meetings on YouTube. They're not long. It would take you maybe 10 to 15 minutes to get through that relevant section. But again, you don't really need to have reviewed those items in order to participate tonight, because Bree and Peyton are going to be guiding you through the discussion topics. They'll be doing a little bit of presenting and then a little bit of discussion, and then people will be able to weigh in and provide feedback. So Bree is gonna use another version that no one has seen yet, another version of a draft land use plan map. And we're gonna talk you through some items and concepts on the draft land use plan map, and get your input. And just to reiterate, we're not gonna talk through everything. You know, there's like infinite things we could talk through. The things we want to talk through tonight are the things where we really didn't gain a lot of, there wasn't like, we're not going to achieve true consensus on everything, that's for sure. But the items we're going to talk about tonight are the things where we really just feel like we want to talk through in more detail with you all and get some input. So with that, I think I'm just gonna give it to Bree and let her kick this off, and we'll start working. Does that sound good, Bree?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen.
Oh
wait.
I stopped.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Can everyone see the 1995 land use map on my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, like Holly said, we want to focus on a few topics where we're looking for feedback. So our goal would be to cover 4 topics. We're going to start with talking about open space and parkland. Then we want to talk about a land use category called development reserve. Then we want to talk about the transportation network. And lastly, we want to get your feedback on some specific questions related to the residential categories. So that's our goal for tonight. And as we go, the format that Peyton and I are imagining is that one of us will present our thinking behind the topic, and then we'll open it up for discussion so that we get a chance to talk through them one by one in those 4 groupings. And first off, I just wanted to start with the 1995 plan for context. In the land use plan document, there were 2 maps. There was this zoomed out map, and then this zoomed in map of the valley. And when we presented at the last public meeting, we really just created 2 scenarios for a zoomed in map. And so in addition to seeing a new version of a draft land use plan map, you're also going to see a new zoomed out map and a zoomed in version, which are the same map, just different scales. And I just wanted to provide that context because I'm sharing my screen and I'm going to jump in back and forth between the maps to help clarify kind of where we're talking about. And so with that, first I'm going to let Peyton talk about the land use categories of open space and parkland. And Peyton, I'll start with the 1995 map and then jump to the new one as you talk through it.
Yes, so on this zoomed out map, the really large kind of pink area on the northeast corner is designated in the 1995 map as commercial recreation. And part of that was because there was talks of doing some resort expansion in that area. So for the new draft map that we're working on, we are not aware of any current plans to expand the resort. So we have designated that large area as open space. And then there are also a couple other areas that we're looking at designating as open space in the zoomed in map. The area off the Seward Highway across from the gas station was zoned as commercial in the 1995 plan, and that area is all Class A wetlands, and we did receive some comments asking to make any wetlands open space, so we went ahead and made that area open space. There were also quite a few comments that pointed out the need for more designated parkland in Girdwood. So the area that we kind of referred to as the squirrel cages. There were some comments that wanted specific parcels in that area to be parkland or community garden, things of that nature. And while there is some land in that area that's suitable for development, it's kind of surrounded by wetlands and also some land that's less suitable for development. So we thought that that would be a good area to designate some more parkland. Those are the main changes for parks and open space. Does anyone have any comments or feedback on those changes?
Barbara first, but I'm assuming it might be Paul, but maybe it's Barbara.
I was Barbara, and I was just curious about down by the highway, how that works with the new highway plan. I mean, at one point, what I saw was a huge interchange there. So how is that gonna all work?
So, Bree, you might be able to answer that as far as what's allowed, right, in a land use category of open space.
Yeah, I think I would say that when it comes to the highway right of way and the impacts of that right of way, we're not necessarily that land, if they end up expanding it, they would have to obtain right of way. So if it's designated open space and they end up expanding the right of way to part of that area, and it goes through the correct approval process, that would be part of it. I think for now, we are basing our land use map on the current right-of-way zones. We're not going to make designations based on future potential right-of-way expansion. I think that's a great thing to keep in mind as a community, absolutely, and being aware of how that interchange could affect those areas. But as a part of this map, we are going to just show the existing right-of-way. Did that answer the question?
Yep, that answers it. Great,
Okay.
thank you.
And this is also Paul. I have a comment, several comments actually. I'm really glad that the squirrel cage area has been designated as parkland, but I sincerely believe that the area just west of the basin subdivision, that forested land there, that should be our central park. Because when you look at the map, like the trails plan, and even with the land use plan that we're working on, it says that we want to have access to recreation outside our doorsteps. And when you look at the map, in the summer especially, there's no parkland, there's no trails for the basin subdivision. And I sincerely believe that the land just west of the basin subdivision, all the way to the river, that should be our central park. Because when you look at the map, there's going to be housing south of Virgin Creek. There's going to be housing that expands on the west side of the highway. And there's people that want to go cross-country skiing or use a forest trail. They're forced, essentially, if they live in the subdivision, to get in their car in the summer especially and drive all the way to Arlberg to get trails. And to me, that's ludicrous, because as our town expands, more people are going to want to hike in the forest. And that'll mean either they don't hike, or they hike on the roads, or they have to get in their car. And then we have to build parking lots. There's some great ski country there in the meadows just west of that subdivision. And that happens to be the finest old growth hemlock forest probably in the municipality. We should save it for park. And I'd like to have other people speak up on that. And
Yeah.
if, if that was parkland, we could connect the mountain side of the valley with the highway side of the valley, which has been requested on virtually every plan that's come out of our valley, is to connect our neighborhoods.
Can I just interrupt you, Paul, here? There's just a couple of little process things. I think we recognize Barbara. If you want to join the conversation, if you could just put your hand up second time, then we can address them individually. And I think
Okay.
Holly was going to say something, I think, about the context of this discussion.
I just want Bree to be able to ask a clarifying
sorry.
question. Also,
Thank you.
I want everybody to remember, and I am absolutely not picking on you, Paul. I'm not doing that. I just want everybody to remember there's a lot of people on tonight, so try to keep your comments concise so that we can make sure everybody has a chance to participate. Okay, so Bree has a clarifying question for Paul, I think.
Yeah, Paul, is it where my little hand cursor is when you say west of the subdivision? Is that
Yes,
what you're
yes, it
talking
is.
about? Okay. Okay.
That's the area that is
Thank you.
currently zoned for commercial recreation. So it's been zoned for recreation now for 30 years. We should not discontinue that zone.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay, let's go. Crystal next, and then Mike.
Okay, so my focus is Southtown site. I'm happy to see that green park parcels have been added. I would suggest that that green, okay, on it's 6-134, that lot that goes all the way to the bend in the road where from the library. I think that needs to be green all the way up, because we're working on something, and when you have two different land use categories on the same lot, it creates issues. So I would rather that be green all the way up and get rid of that blue there on the corner. And then I need some clarification as to why 6-076 is listed as public institutions, because that's the parcel that we've been working on for 3 years. And I was suggesting it be mixed use, because that is basically, if anything is going to be developable in Southtown site, it's that parcel. So if we put it as public lands and institutions, it's super limited into how it could be utilized.
Okay, so you're suggesting when you say 6134, instead of having this sliver of PLI, extend the parkland there.
All the way to the, yep.
And then you're suggesting that this PLI should be mixed use.
Yes, and
Okay.
part of that depend on if it's developable or not, which we will have a much clearer understanding of between now and March. And if it ends up being undevelopable, if it's mixed use, we could still use it as park. And I verified that with Daniel McKenna Foster in person.
Okay.
I don't know if he's on, I didn't see him on this meeting, but I just made sure. I was like, if it's mixed use, you can also use it for park. He said yes.
Yeah, park is allowed in mixed use land designations, right, Bree? And Daniel is on.
Yeah, Daniel is on. Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Related to that, when you were saying waiting to see if it's developable, does that have to do with like some environmental constraints you're familiar with?
Yes.
Okay. And is that, I'm guessing it's flooding or?
So yeah, there's currently the California Creek is changing directions, or changing course, and I think partially that has to do with the culvert that goes underneath Alyeska Highway for California Creek is apparently undersized. Even though it's a big culvert, it probably should have been a bridge. So it's filled up with gravel, causing the flood, or the water level to be higher, and is now like fanning out all over Forest Fair Beer Garden. So it's changing, the way that the water flows. And so we need to, and this is the reason why the flood concern was the reason why the child care facility is not being placed in Southtown site. And so now we're trying to figure out if developers and builders think it is feasible for development or not, because this is one of the only spots that is developable. So we got to make sure that we're doing the right thing with it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Thanks. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Actually, it relates a little bit to my first point, relates a little bit to what was just said by Crystal. I've heard from, actually, Willem is on here and he may be able to confirm that when the land has been identified as Class A wetland, mainly by aerial surveys, and when there's a more detailed analysis on the ground, sometimes the classifications are different. I mean, it tends to still be wetland of some type, but often a different class. So sometimes when we're making decisions on, based on, say, just an aerial view, that may not be the correct one long term. So that's just a thing to keep in mind. My second point was about the area currently owned by the Mental Health Trust immediately to the west of Alyeska Highway, north of the Seward Highway. I know the Mental Health Trust have some plans and ideas about what to do with that. So, which was predicated on it being kind of commercial or mixed. So there probably is some discussion to be had there. Not all of the land is wetland. There's definitely a higher section up towards the railway. And my third point was about the change of commercial. I think you're going to touch on development reserve later, but I think the removal of commercial recreation in the Upper Valley is great, and I thank you for doing that. I think that's the right path.
Okay, thank you. Any other follow-up questions, Bree or Peyton?
No, I think we could actually, some of the things that Paul brought up actually transitioned us well to the development reserve and that Mike brought up. So we could start talking about that.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. Sort of one thing I forgot to say is, I meant to say this in connection with the things at the entrance to the valley. One of my comments was about the tsunami analysis and tsunami risk analysis, which has been done since we started this project. In fact, I think since you were working on the draft maps. Is that going to be taken into account? We don't have, it's not to the extent we can actually determine land use, but it's definitely related. I don't know if that changes the way that we would.
It did identify this as a potential tsunami risk, the area along the highway. I think Daniel, I might have him chime in a little bit. He can speak to this well because they ran into similar issues with the 2040 plan. But if there's existing housing there, what do you identify it as? That has been something we've tried to grapple with. And I think, identifying this area as open space is consistent with not creating additional land uses that conflict with a tsunami zone. So that's on top of it being a wetland. And like you said, we're not totally sure the classification once you're on the ground, but keeping that open space does not create a new conflict with the tsunami. But if areas are already developed, it's kind of hard to redefine those. And Daniel, do you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the planning position that I think any planner would take. They'd say, look, this is an area that's in the tsunami zone. So in the future, it's not ideal to have residential land uses there. Now, if you're living there, that sounds like, oh, you don't want me to be here. But it's not really saying that. It's just saying as things change and properties change hands over time, it would be better if these transition to other types of properties naturally through that sort of process. It might take 40, 50 years. But obviously, a lot of people don't like to hear that. They're not going to want to, and it makes sense. But I think in a place like Valdez, after they had the tsunami, then they changed their waterfront to say, you can't have this type of uses here anymore. And so they have like RV parks or something like that. But it's really just, if you're looking at the environmental risks, I mean, that's one of the things that in planning, that there is a pretty clear relationship between environmental risks and some zoning, and to say, and this isn't even zoning we're going to do, but the designation say, look, this is a high risk area. So just generally speaking, it would make more sense to encourage people to go somewhere else. But working with a framework to say, but we know people already live there. So there doesn't need to be anything that makes anybody leave, but just sort of encouraging long-term, just saying in the future, it might make more sense if this wasn't a focused central area, but people can live there as long as they want. So again, I say that is sort of the planning position, understanding that people might not want that on the map. But I'll probably say that to the very end, say it's a tsunami zone. It's probably not the best idea to have housing there, but it's like in Japan, they have the tsunami stones and they said, don't build below this stone. And then after 50, 60, 70 years, people say, well, it's not a big deal. And then they build up to it. But it's just sort of, it's a guide, right? It's a plan, but we're not talking about the zoning and we're not forcing anybody to leave or anything.
Thanks.
Okay, Bree, why don't you move on to the development reserve concept? And this is one where we want to like have a lot of discussion around.
Yeah. So in the 1995 plan, they had a category called development reserve, and it's this light purple. So you can see it's designated this area in the southeast, and then this area up here along Crow Creek Road. And I'm going to read the definition because that's helpful. So in the 1995 plan, they said it was areas that are generally suitable for development, but whose location and absence of public facilities and lack of projected demand make near and intermediate term development inappropriate and unnecessary. So that concept is something we're grappling with a little bit. If part of our exercise initially was to look at environmental factors, and these areas specifically do provide developable land. Again, this map, the green areas show areas that don't have immediate environmental hazards at kind of a large scale. So that one of those purple areas was down here and one of those purple areas was up here. So in the plans we showed at the public meeting, we did not include a development reserve category. We had showed those two areas as either open space or some type of residential use, I believe. And I'm going to jump to what we're proposing now. Right now, we did add a development reserve category, and we identified that location, the location in the southeast, and we even expanded it all the way to the existing residential. And it's probably easier to see on this zoomed in map. So it's a light pink striped area. This area here, and then this area here, and actually this pocket in here as well. And so this is something we're looking for feedback on. We think the definition from 1995 makes a lot of sense. Even your current population projections don't demand that amount of land expansion in any of the foreseeable future. The acreage calculations that Agnew-Beck gave us were able to meet and go above and beyond in terms of acreage in the already designated areas that are vacant. So a lot of the HLB lands. So on one hand, it made sense to us to keep a development reserve category. I think on the flip side of that, the downside of that is that a land use plan, in a sense, is identifying what you want to see in places that may not get developed for years and years to come. So your community is already going through this exercise. Why not just designate what you would want to see there? Because what could happen is if some type of development were interested in happening here and it went through because these are HLB lands, went through the process of working with HLB, this document wouldn't provide any guidance on what land uses should happen at that specific spot. It would just say development reserve. So it kind of leaves it open-ended. So those are kind of the two pros and cons that we were discussing. So yeah, we are interested in feedback for this area, specifically this area. And then this third area is a little more tricky. We did receive input comments that people were interested in seeing this as open space. There are trails identified in the Girdwood Trails Plan in this area. Those are those green dashed lines. But our understanding is also that HLB is working with a potential developer for the area, and they're interested in developing things that are, from our understanding, potentially aligned with a lot of your goals, such as providing diverse housing and different community amenities. So we were thinking about designating mixed use with the caveat that they would need to work around the proposed trails and make sure that those are part of it. So yeah, hopefully that gives you guys something to talk about and ask us questions on, give us input.
We'll start with Mitch.
Yeah, thank you. So in relation to that, the forest area west of the basin subdivision that Paul was speaking about, my sense was that, and I agree with this, that forest land, which might be developable by cutting down the trees, needs to be preserved. And so I'm wondering how putting it in a development reserve would help preserve the area, or if there's some other land use category that would be more appropriate that would indicate that it's not to be developed, even though it's potentially developable at the destruction of another resource. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like, and would your preference then to be to designate that area as open space or parkland?
I would think parkland would be more specific.
Parkland. And I guess how we were defining open space versus parkland is open space is a natural area that can have trails and amenities in it, but a designated park area might be something that the Parks and Rec department actively manages with more amenities like ball fields, or I mean, it can also be natural areas with trails, but I don't know if that's helpful.
I think the difference is developed versus like not developed. So some of the things, because I remember Paul talking about this, like in this scenario, I would say developed versus not developed would be like trail oriented development would be like more not developed. But in a case that's close to a neighborhood like this, you could see something like a picnic shelter or a playground. So I think that's the difference. If parks and open space is a priority for this area, we'd want to understand, is this gardens and playgrounds and potentially a field of some sort, or is this trails?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Let's keep the discussion going, but we'll go to Mike next, because I'm assuming you're on topic.
Ish.
Ish. Okay.
My recollection of the 1995 plan is that it was talking about a projected population of around about 12,000, well, back 12,000 several years ago. So it would be in the 12 to 15,000 population range, and we're actually around 2. And in that plan, these areas were far future development beyond that 12,000 people. So we're currently looking towards, I think depending which part of the projection you believe, something like 3,000 people within the next, 2 decades. So to me, there seems to be no point at all in worrying about what we'll do with person number 25,000 when we're not looking to be anything close to that size in the, several decades ahead. So my opinion would be that we don't need a development reserve of this size. We already have far more land identified in the sort of residential and mixed development zones than we need for any of the projections of population or growth. So I don't see a value in development reserve. I do see value in keeping it as either open. I think the argument about open space or parks is kind of a nuanced one and a very interesting one. But I would say the majority of the land that's marked as development would probably, I would recommend it stays as open space with possibly some parkland mixed in there. The area immediately north of the airport, I have conflicting opinions on. I know there is an active, if there hadn't been an active effort to develop that land, I think the answer is clear. It should stay open space. The fact that there is a plan to develop it, and there's been, you know, the landowner is also already actively involved in that negotiation, kind of sets up this likely conflict if we go down that path. Now, maybe that's the way the community wants to go. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. I don't feel comfortable falling one side or the other of that at the moment, because I honestly haven't thought all the way through the implications. So that area where the cursor is now, I think is definitely going to be a point of deeper discussion. And I see Willem's hand is up. So
Yeah,
as
go
the
ahead,
person
Willem.
wanting to develop that land, I'm interested in his opinion.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, we have identified this area as developable, and are currently pursuing that with the HLB. We presented plans for this back in September. I would say very open plans, as we wanted to gain community feedback first, and also look at, you know, what came about through this process. But I was just wondering, in the definition of development reserve, and maybe as it sits right now, how does that change from the current land use, and what is the definition of, I guess it says, you know, not being contemplated for development and in the short term or medium term, but we, you know, think the potential of developing this might happen over the next 5 or 10 years. So what is that definition that's in development reserve? Yeah, that's a question I have.
You're asking what the actual number is for short term and long term?
Yeah.
I don't know, and that definition is pulled from the 1995 plan. I don't remember seeing a specific number of years, but because the plan was for 20 years, it was probably beyond that. In our case, how we define it and use it, we could define that better in the plan, but I think just initially gauging people's feedback is that maybe it's not a land use category that we actually want to include moving forward. So I mean, just hearing, it sounds like you guys would be looking to develop it in a shorter term than what a development reserve category would entail. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
I mean, thinking about, I mean, obviously I don't have an opinion about, you know, mixed use or open space or, but I think what you should think about when you're like, say there's no development reserve category and we're thinking about assigning different land use categories to these areas where we have added the development reserve, like we still have to think about, okay, where are the utilities? What are the adjacent land uses? Where does it make most sense? Where are the environmental considerations? What are uplands versus wetlands? So those are the things we should be thinking about if it's not a development reserve and we assign a more definitive land use category to it. We need to make sure we're considering all the same factors that we used for the rest of the valley.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Bree, maybe you can help me be more specific. I don't know.
No, I think that's a great point. And maybe to tie that into this spot specifically, in the 1995 plan, it's identified as, actually the zoom in makes it easier to read. I've been calling it the mitten because it's shaped like a mitten. Here it's designated resort. So in our last plans, we had one where it was mixed use and we had one where it was open space. And so I think those are if we're not moving a development reserve category forward, I think we're going to look again at either doing probably one of those two designations, because right now the land use categories doesn't include just a resort category, where those areas that were designated resort are likely mixed use on this map. And it sounds like the plans with HLB would be consistent with a mixed use designation. Is that correct, Willem? Is that I mean, I guess you'd have to know all the details of the definition, but my assumption is you're envisioning housing and community uses and commercial uses.
Yeah, and I think I had asked that in maybe a few meetings ago, how the definition would change, and that would come later in the process, from the current definition resort to mixed use there. But I mean, just thinking of the category mixed use, it would probably be within that.
Yeah, we could look specifically at the definition changes in more detail, but generally it'd probably allow for more general uses. Does anyone else have comments on that area specifically?
Excuse me, I've been trying to figure out how to raise my hand. This is Carolyn, so when you're ready to call on me.
Is it on this topic, Carolyn?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you talk and then we'll go to you next, Mike, because you haven't had a chance to talk yet.
All right, thank you. So this particular area north of the airport, yes, it was always resort reserve since the 95 plan, and it's caused me countless nights of sleep. That's a personal comment. Anyway, I do just think you need to take into account the multitude all the comments that were brought forward here for it to be open space and for the trails. And yes, it's in the trails plan as the forest loop. And you're just kidding yourself if you think you can mix a bunch of condos or other housing in and preserve this area as it needs to be preserved. And, you know, I just think you need to listen to the people of this community and how important this piece of land is as an open space and a place of trails, and the condos and shops and other development can't be mixed in if it's going to be the area it is now. So please listen to the comments and look at all the comments you've received. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
I've got 2 points. One on the same topic. I don't think we can. We've acknowledged already that there are places that have been developed and are now housing, whereas if we looked at this as a blank map, we perhaps wouldn't necessarily want housing to be in an area that's more prone to subsidence and tsunami risk. So we're already accepting there are certain things that are in place and we can't change. This is an area where the reason that land was chosen wasn't necessarily it was the best land. It was already designated in the 95 plan and the subsequent zoning as somewhere that the resort could use. So it had been identified 20 odd years ago and allocated then. We don't have to preserve that going forwards, and it's just an accident of timing to some extent that there happens to be some plans started for that area. But at the same time, maybe that is the right location. I'm just saying that it's not, you know, if we were doing this a year ago, if we got the funding faster from the mayor's office, we wouldn't be having the discussion at the same time, because we would have done this 6 to 8 months ago before the resort had this planned at the level they do now. So I don't think just the accident of timing should determine our, should force our hand one way or the other. I think it should be the way the community wants it to go. That was my first point. My other point is to kind of throw the cat amongst the pigeons. And we've already identified that the amount of land we're allocating to residential development, commercial development mixed is far greater than our need in the next definitely decade, probably 2 decades. Should we consider taking some of that and moving it into development reserve if there are some areas that we're allocating towards residential or commercial development which are less suitable for development now due to infrastructure? So do this the other way around. Take out the development reserve that's in there now and actually allocate effectively a lower priority and a higher priority of residential or mixed development within the current areas.
Yeah, I mean, it's an idea. It's something that could happen. The same thing is happening, right? You're taking away your ability to say this should be housing. And
that's why I'm asking that's why I'm posing it as a question, not a statement.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I don't know if there's a way to I guess you let the market or the environmental conditions phase it for you.
Unless we actually unless we decide now based on the environment or infrastructure that some of the areas we're saying is residential are lower preference residential and should be in decade 3, not decade 1 or 2.
Yeah, but I think what I'm saying is that market conditions and actual financial considerations for development will likely prioritize
do that anyway. Okay, yeah, fair point.
But okay, Willem, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on that area again. I know within the areas around the resort, we presented some options at the town hall that were quite dense in nature, with condos and workforce housing and additional recreation facilities. But the plans so far within that HLB owned land is for rather low impact residential use, and our design team is working pretty hard to integrate in the trails plan that's trying to be passed right now too. So that the plan is not to go in and just make a mess of this. We're taking a lot of consideration around that environment and the trails plan that's being proposed, and trying to make it a really low impact development that is able to add residential housing stock to Girdwood. But yeah, just wanted to put that out there. We will be in the coming months having another community meeting to present those ideas. I know it was just an open space in the last meeting, but just given what feedback was given during our initial town hall, we're planning on presenting something which will be open to community comment and public comment.
Thanks. Okay, go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I just want to make sort of a general comment that the zoning as it exists now is the law of the land. So anybody who is working within the zoning as it is now has the full rights to do that. So if they follow all the rules, that's just the way it is, and including the designation as it is now. So I just want to emphasize that the way the rules are in the book at the time that somebody goes for a permit, that's the way it applies. And every property owner sort of enjoys that right. So if you're looking at changes that maybe affect the current regulations, I would just suggest that the way things are now, those are the rules that apply, and everybody has the full right to use those rules.
Go ahead, Mike.
Can I just ask one nuance on that, Daniel? If someone is doing something such as a conditional use permit or asking for a variance or something else, and the comprehensive plan that's adopted at that point is not consistent with the current zoning, then we end up with this kind of weird thing of where if they're not doing anything special, they can go ahead and use the existing zoning. But if they're doing anything which is extra, it has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, which it would not be. So there looks like there's some transition period where while people can do things that are completely within the clear purpose of zoning, things that are slightly outside, it would not be possible. Is that the right interpretation?
I guess I'm going to give you a bureaucratic answer and say whatever the criteria allows, and whoever has the power to make the decision of whether something meets the criteria for that conditional use or not, that's sort of the way it goes. And I'll be honest, I don't know if the specific criteria for a conditional use in Girdwood, if it is different or not. So, and also it's tough. Honestly, I think it's been difficult because the 1995 plan is so old, and it isn't that explicit about how it should be used, or the zoning isn't explicit how the two should interact. I think for whoever's making that decision, which is much higher than me, it's some policy decision. It's difficult, but my quick answer is that everything should be decided. Either the policy makes a policy call, or they decide based on the criteria. Because ultimately it's about, is something susceptible to legal challenge or not? And if something goes through the process and meets all the criteria, it's very hard to challenge that legally. So sorry, I kind of punted on your.
That's fine. When we have had conditional use permits that have been appealed, the Board of Adjustment was all about what does the comprehensive plan say. So that might answer at least part of that if it does go down a semi-legal path, maybe the comprehensive plan dominates. But we're probably down a rabbit hole now, so I'll stop.
Okay. Any other opinions about development reserve versus as a land use category itself, just broadly, versus defining actual land uses? Go ahead, Daniel, because it sparked a debate internally with us, so that's why we really want to make sure we talk it through. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking through the Girdwood chapter, and it's really hard to figure out what the development reserve allows, and basically just says you can do certain stuff with a master plan. And it is kind of like Bree mentioned, it's sort of this holding category for another holding category. So I think in terms of just simplicity, choose, you either want it to be parks, or you want it to be developable, or you want it to be open space. But having development reserve sort of seems to create this other, it's just like another step I don't know, for people to go through. And to me, it does seem like, look, the land is either going to be suitable for development in the eyes of the community, or it's not. But development reserve sort of seems to be kicking the can down the road a little bit. So I think I would recommend, just from the procedural standpoint, it's a lot easier not to have that, and just make the decision. Do you want it X or do you want it Y? But development reserve is a sort of gray category.
Go ahead, Kirk. Also, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Thank you. I was trying to unmute, and I think I did. Yeah, I just wanted to also agree with what Daniel was saying. I think now is the time to determine the uses for these areas. If it's a development reserve, it's basically a conflict referral. We're going to pass this conflict to somebody else. So I think residents are capable of voicing their opinions and establishing land uses for these areas. And I think a lot of public comment has been raised already in these two areas, and I would certainly encourage more. But yeah, I think determining the use of these areas and designating it now is really best, and not passing that conflict down the road.
Thank you. Okay. Bree, do you want to move on to another topic?
Yeah. The next one is transportation, and I'm gonna pass it off to Peyton.
Easy topic.
Yes, so on a change we made from our last drafts to this current draft is we have on this draft we are not showing the official states and highway plan roads on this map, but the planning department pointed out that we will need to address or comment on those roads. So currently our intent is to not show them on the land use plan map, but in our land use plan narrative, show those roads in their own graphic. And there we can provide specific commentary to each road and kind of the feedback that we've received in comments on each road and how it works within our plan. Does anyone have thoughts or comments on that approach to the roads?
Yeah, and keep in mind the roads the roads in question are really like future roads that have not been constructed yet. Maybe, do you have a graphic that shows that, Bree? Or maybe it's.
Yeah, I'm
one
gonna
of-
pull up the official streets and highways plan.
Yeah.
Because that's what we were showing on the map in the
Yep.
last version. Yeah.
So what I just want to reiterate is through this process, so the official streets and highways plan is its own plan. It's its own plan that guides the future roadways and their classifications. Okay, so through your comprehensive plan, which we're working on now, you have the ability to make comments and recommendations about the future of this official streets and highways plan. So I think you should use this as an opportunity to do that. And Bree, why don't you talk through this a little bit now? If you want to.
Yeah, and just to.
Or Peyton.
I was just gonna add that, and I think I'm in a way restating what you just said, Holly, but in the 1995 plan, the document has a land use plan graphic, the one I've been pulling up from 1995, that doesn't show proposed roads, but then there's a chapter on transportation that does show similar proposed roads. So that's kind of how and that's what Peyton said too, how we're planning to speak to these roads in this plan. And then maybe I'll just add in one example. We received a lot of comments about this new potential road. People were interested in making sure it was low impact to the environment and really only built if necessary. So what we would do then in the plan is speak to those comments in narrative form.
Okay. Mike, I know you had your hand up. Why don't you kick this off?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think you actually summarized it pretty well, Holly. So the reason these are in the official streets and highway plan is because they were mostly because they were in the 95 plan. And the 95 plan was bluntly trying to turn Girdwood into Vale. That's a very poor way of saying it, but effectively it was looking at having Girdwood at 5 to 10 times the size it is now by now. That's not our vision. That's not what happened. It's not our vision. So I would say if we're looking rationally at what we want the transportation network to be in the next 2 decades, it's not this extensive. Some of the things in here probably we would have, but not all of them. And therefore, the comprehensive plan itself is the way we can justify to use updating the official streets and highway plan to remove some of these things which are not necessary. So I agree with your general principle. And I think that's the right way to progress. So we can then have one of the implementation actions will be update the OSHP to be consistent with the views of the comprehensive plan. Because ultimately the comprehensive plan is the superior plan here, and OSHP should follow that. So I agree.
Go ahead, Larry.
If you don't show the eventual roads in this plan, I mean, somehow it has to be referenced. And so I would disagree that, that we ignore that issue. We're looking to look at the comprehensive plan, and you can't have a comprehensive land use plan if you don't know where people are going to be able to, where things are going to move at, where to direct, expensive infrastructure decisions towards, not to mention just the whole safety issue, of the community. So, so I, for one, would say that somewhere in the plan you have to show what the eventual build out of roads will be. Certainly AWWU and everybody else that does planning based upon this has to understand too how those will all work out. And I guess I would also add that if you look at the plat that the airport has, doesn't even, doesn't comply with or, work with this particular map. So they show a completely different route. And it'd be nice to get everybody on the same page.
Thanks, Larry. One of the Jonas family members.
That's Julie. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, I'd just like to clarify, Mike, you kept saying that this is based on the comprehensive plan. My understanding, Holly, and I put this in my comments, is that the roads plan looks like it pretty much follows the commercial areas and transportation master plan, which became part of the law. It was a follow-up to the Girdwood area plan. I just want to clarify if that you're shaking your head yes. So I just want everybody to understand that that is the case then.
Yeah, and I think Bree, you have an image from that plan as well. Yeah, the overarching initial guidance came from the Girdwood area plan. The commercial areas and transportation plan was next. This one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
then the OS and HP official streets and highways plan was like the next document.
Okay, thank you. And I wanted to clarify or just reiterate something that I put in my comments, and I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand until just now, but if you're looking for feedback, I'm in favor of having the area north of the airport designated as open space, not development reserve. Thanks.
Thanks for weighing in. Okay, Mike, more?
Just a very brief comment. I think Larry and I are saying the same thing. I think Larry's saying we have to have the set of roads in there that we eventually want. I'm saying the same thing. My opinion is the network that's represented here is far more than we will want in the next 20 or so years. And I think it was predicated on a completely different type of community to either what did happen or what we want to happen. So it's just an issue of scale. It's not an issue of principle. So I think we agree it's just slightly different positions along the continuum.
Yeah, and it sounds like that's consistent with the direction we're planning to go in. The 1995 plan had this separate map, and that's what we'll plan to do as well, have a separate map that incorporates the transportation comments we received.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I guess I'll just give, in terms of putting it on or not, I'm just thinking in the future, somebody using this, if you want policymakers or planners or whoever to use this 20 years in the future, if everything is clear in one place, it'll be easier for them to look at it. So I think that'd be a vote for sort of looking at it. And we talked about this internally too. You wouldn't want to leave everything off and then people say, oh, well, they didn't include roads, so they must have just been okay with what this previous one is. So I think it is helpful to be direct about what you do or don't want. Because I mean, roads ultimately are a land use, and it's a land use plan map. The streets and highways plan is more or less the land use plan map for rights of way. But that's kind of not the way things work, even though it might. So that, yeah, I think that's, I can say in terms of a planner, if they're looking at something and they say, okay, should this go in or not? If everything is in one place, it's probably easier for them to get that bit of information.
So your recommendation is that the land use plan actually has the proposed road networks as opposed to a separate map?
I would say yes, just so that somebody couldn't say, oh, it was just left off because they wanted us to use the old one. Or if it's in the text but not on the map, then somebody might not look at the text, but they're always going to look at the map. So that's kind of how I would think through it. But if the map gets too busy, I mean, I don't know. That's another question. But.
Okay. That's helpful.
Bree, do you want any more guidance on the actual roadways themselves? Do you want to talk about those, or do you feel like you have the guidance you need right now through the comments. Or do you want to talk about it anymore? I guess that's my question.
I guess if someone has feedback that comes to mind, I think I could just generally, the comments were more focused on this road. I think people either weren't interested in seeing the road, or they thought if the road was necessary from like a safety or traffic volume standpoint, that they just wanted to make sure it was done in a really thoughtful way that didn't impact the environment significantly. So I guess if anyone, that's the sense we got from this road. If anyone has any different opinions on that, I'd love to hear it.
Can you reiterate the narrative from the 1995 plan that talks about the resort development and how that could you reiterate that, please?
Yeah, so in the 1995 plan, they had a transportation chapter, and in it talked about the addition of this road here. So on the plan, they showed this, and they described it as necessary if the resort were to double in size. So that was already after the hotel had been built. So they're picturing resort development north beyond the current footprint. So they were thinking, okay, if you're gonna have so much traffic that you're gonna have to expand Alyeska Highway, instead of expanding the highway, create an additional route. So that was the narrative around this new Girdwood access road at the time.
So the thing that I would like to just add is that communities all across the world right now, right, are talking about resiliency as it relates to flooding, fire, earthquake, tsunami, and that sort of thing. So I guess we're also interested in, so the resort doubling in size is maybe not a conversation for now, but community resiliency and community safety is a conversation for now. So in light of those two different concepts, I think we're interested in talking about that a little more. And Barbara or Paul has your hand up.
This is Barbara. And I was just thinking about, you've got that huge section of what's currently on the new map saying development reserve. If you don't have that road shown through there, you kind of look at it and you wonder, well, if that ends up all being houses, how are those people accessing that? And then in terms of the area north of the airport, Willem saying that it's going to be low impact, but you don't show the road, doesn't really, to me, it's much more visceral in my mind, thinking about the development happening north of the airport when I think about a road that's going to go right through the middle of Stumpy's Winter Trail. It's just a different feeling to me. So not having the road shown, I feel like I'm only getting half the picture, I think is what I'm trying to say. Thanks.
Hey, this is Tim Cabana. Can I talk about the road?
Yeah, who is this? Oh,
Tim
yeah.
Cabana. I'm the one that the road ends up on my property. And this whole road thing's been a completely unfair thing to me from day one. First of all, that's my private property that the muni believes that they can just have, and I have to give it to them or something, and that's not fair at all. And second, it really messes up my whole development. It goes right through the middle of it. Third, it says in there that before a road was built, and this is in the transportation plan, that the highway would be upgraded first, and there's other ways to do it besides the road. And third, the road doesn't need to go through my property. I mean, there's 5 dead-end muni roads, Alpena all the way to Virgin Creek, that it could go into and accomplish the same thing, and not go across my private property and basically steal my land and mess up my subdivision that I've been working on for 20 years. And it's just been a complete fiasco. This is why I went to the land use and the GBOS in the fall of 2020 And I was at, you introduce and you go back, and it was a well-attended meeting, and we have a 28-0 vote at land use, which is impossible in Girdwood to get 28 to not everybody to agree to anything. And nobody wants this road. So this thing needs to go away. It needs to get off of that transportation plan. And if you want to draw it part way up the valley and dead end it or something, and then there's a redundancy thing about, we need more roads for redundancy. Seward doesn't have redundancy. Homer doesn't have redundancy. Juneau doesn't have a road at all. There's almost every single place in Alaska doesn't have 2 roads going to it. Very few do. So we don't need redundancy. This thing where we're going to plan for the 0.5% chance that something might happen and mess all the whole plans up because of it. That doesn't make any sense. So, and I've been pretty adamant, and I've been working with the Muni on this for 20 years. I've gotten nowhere. So the best place for this to start is with this when this plan comes out. If that road is off the plan, then I can go back to the transportation plan and say, we don't want this road, and this is why X, Y, Z, and we can get rid of this road. It doesn't need to be built. And it goes through a whole bunch of Class A wetlands. The Corps wouldn't let you build it anyway. The Corps looks at things like this. This is your chances when you want to build a Corps. You have do nothing, the least damage you can do option, and this other option, right? So they're not going to let you do the most destructive option. They're going to make you do the least destructive or nothing. So it's never going to be built. It's never going to be funded. And it just needs to go away.
Okay, thanks, Tim, very much.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else want to talk on any of these?
Yeah.
Well, okay, who is the person who is Zoom user? Go ahead. Introduce yourself first, maybe.
Hey, I think I'm the Zoom user. This is Grace Pleasance.
Hi, Grace.
Hi. Are we talking about the what was once upon a time, or potentially has been on several maps, about a secondary access out of Girdwood? Is that the road we're talking about right now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we certainly don't need to repeat tragedies in communities like Paradise, or for instance, what recently happened last year in Lahaina, where you have only one access. And when a tragedy of magnitude of whether it be fire or earthquake or some unknown natural catastrophe comes forward, if the upper valley does not have a secondary access, that is what is, we are stuck. And is my understanding, and I could be way off, but I think I do recall hearing that the land that Mr. Cabana is talking about, when he purchased that property, he was well aware of the public easement on that property. And so it is not something that is new to him or the community, but we have talked about having a secondary access for well over, my understanding, 40 years in this valley. We have not gotten to the point where we have stepped up to deal with it. I will say that as somebody who does live in that upper part of the valley, I am concerned that we do not have a secondary access if something were to happen to our main highway. And when it comes to upgrading of Alyeska Highway, it has to be upgraded to federal standards. And it has to be upgraded to federal standards because it is a state highway. It received federal funds when it was built. And that was the deal that was cut back ages ago. So if any road is being built in Girdwood with federal money, that road will be done to federal standards. So I think we should just be aware of that, because if not, any road that goes, unless it's a private road, that private road has its own standards. But any money that has any public traffic on it will be built to a federal standard level if the state is involved and we do receive federal funds. So that's all I want to say on this issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. Go ahead, Amanda.
Hi, good evening. Couple things. I was wondering, so there's two places where we can cross the creek or be able to access the highway from uphill, I guess, of the creek. Was there like people were more in favor of the Crow Creek Earlburg connector or the new Girdwood access road?
Bree, can you respond to that?
I think we got more comments about people not being in favor of either. More so than like one versus the other. But that I'd be interested in opinions like, yeah, is there a preference for a connection across the valley?
So the Crow Creek Arlberg connector, as much as the new Girdwood access road is potential to have, it would be hard to build potentially, which I don't know. I can't, it's not a wetlands map that it's on, so it's hard to know for sure. I think the Crow Creek Arlberg connector is also a spot that's going to be really hard to build. I think that road easement is over a pretty substantial canyon potentially, or just like the crossing will be hard to build and expensive. So either one I think is going to have its challenges. I do appreciate the want to not go through what is now private land. So if there was a way to put it through a different connector to the Timberline neighborhood, Alyeska Basin. And then the other issue is that the DOT is looking and pursuing expanding the gravel pit, where I believe that the exit of the new Girdwood access road is going through currently in this on this map. And that would become another issue. So if there was another possibility, or possibly we might have to like work around that. I think they're presenting it at our next GBOS meeting. So just my comments. Thank you.
I was just going to ask Peyton if you remember more detailed comments related to those two roads that I haven't touched on.
I think there were more in opposition, but there were some supporters of both roads for sure.
Amanda, I have a
This is Tim
question.
Caban again. Could I say something, in response to what Grace said there, as far as this redundancy?
Yeah, go ahead. But go ahead.
It first of all, even if the bridge went out, we have an airport on one side. It's not a life safety thing, okay? It would be an inconvenience. But I've lived in Girdwood for 40 years. I know who lives in Girdwood. It wouldn't be 24 hours, and they'd have a new road built across that river with something, some sort of temporary bridge or something. Very resourceful people live down there with a lot of equipment. I mean, my buddy Paul Ingram could build a bridge across there in 12 hours by himself. So this is not somebody's going to die, I'm not going to be able to get anywhere type situation, okay? So, and like I said, no towns in Alaska have two roads to them. Seward certainly doesn't. Homer certainly doesn't. Juneau doesn't have a road at all, and nobody's dying there. So this is a fallacy that I don't know. There's a couple of people, and I don't know why they are pushing for this road, but they didn't show up at the land use meeting or the GBS meeting where it was 28-0. That's what the valley and the people believe, is that it's not necessary, okay? And it isn't necessary. So, I mean, it's just, don't let your emotions get control of like, oh my God, we could lose the bridge and we'll never be able to get to Anchorage to buy anything at Costco. That's not the way it is. So they'll find a way to put a temporary bridge.
Thank you for your opinion. I appreciate the comment. And I think Holly had a question to follow up.
I did. I wanted to talk the most interesting thing in the world. I want to talk about that gravel pit just a little bit.
Yes.
I'm not sure I caught your comment. there's a conflict with the terminus of the road and the location of the gravel pit. Is that the deal?
I believe so.
Okay, all right. I'll dig into that a little bit more.
Tim Glassett with the DOT brought it to our attention.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I should have passed it on to you sooner.
No,
I
it's
have
okay.
another thing to say in response. If you don't mind.
No, go ahead, and then we'll go to Mike. And then we're gonna go to housing.
Great. I will review the 2020 land use decision. I believe, because I think I was there, that the vote was more about not going through personal property or private property, I'm sorry. As not necessarily about whether the whole road should be in there, but I will review and I'll make sure. And then also, I understand the 24-hour in a non life-threatening event where just the bridge goes out. The issue that we're finding is that we have a new wildfire map, and Girdwood is susceptible to wildfire now, as much as it didn't used to be in the past. I understand it is now in the wildfire map, and that is not something that we can outrun or wait out. So having this emergency access, even if other communities in Alaska don't have a secondary access, doesn't mean that we shouldn't, because we can, unlike places like Seward and Homer where they terminate at the ocean. So I'm still supportive of the secondary access. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
I was going to speak to the gravel pit issue. There's a conditional use permit for use of that area to store explosives and use it as a heliport. It would have a 1/4 mile all habitation excluded area around it. The other thing I was going to mention briefly is people often talk about Paradise as being an example of a risk, and it was a horrible tragedy. There were 4 different exit routes from Paradise. Not all of them were usable, but there were multiple different evacuation routes used at the same time, and they were all much further apart than these 2 roads would be, and there was still a tragedy. So, this is by no means a panacea. Even if we had an exit route here, as somebody has suggested, if we're going to be safe, we need one going over Crow Pass, going northwards. But I don't think we're going to put that in this plan.
All right. I know it's a hot topic. We'll continue to talk about it. I'm quite certain. But I want to give the last 25 minutes to get into another hot topic surrounding housing and housing densities. So I think Bree and Daniel, I think, are going to talk this one through. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So the 1995 plan had 2 residential specific categories: single family residential and multifamily residential. At the public meeting, we presented one map that had what we called low density with some light mixed use potential. We call that lower density residential and cottage craft, and then a higher density residential and in-home business. So we had those 2 on one map, and then on the other map, we just had one residential category so that you're not distinguishing between 2 different densities. And the feedback we got is that people did want to see different density residential areas. So we ended up moving forward. Well, so far we've moved forward with the lower density and higher density. So this new map, and I'm going to jump to the zoomed in version. We have the low density, high density. So the areas and where we show it changed too from what we had in the previous one. A lot of comments just wanted areas that were single family to remain single family. Right now, we're not going to include a single family land use category. We're just doing the lower density category because kind of 2 reasons. One, the policy and goal statements that you guys have developed so far does say that you don't want to have just a single family use category, that you do want to provide opportunities for additional levels of density. in the lowest category. So that's why we did maintain a lower density residential category. But I think that the question we have for you guys tonight is we're interested in hearing maybe what your vision is for these two categories in terms of more specific numbers. And Daniel's going to share his screen if he's ready to, potentially. Let me know. To show you some densities in terms of dwelling units per acre in numbers. And we're interested in hearing, what do you guys want to see in the two residential categories when it comes to dwelling units per acre?
And just before Daniel talks, we realized as a team, as we were talking this through, is that just even internally to our team, like Daniel loves to talk about dwelling units per acre. It's like a really nerdy planning thing, which is great because that's how you like really understand. But all of us is just like regular people. We don't go around talking about dwelling units per acre. And that means it doesn't mean anything to some people. So we want to kind of have a conversation about what densities of housing mean to you. So anyway, go ahead, Daniel. Didn't mean to make fun of you, but it's fun.
Holly just threw a lot of cold water on the planning profession. But let me assure, I mean, planning, I know planning, a lot of it is kind of nonsense. A lot of it is kind of arbitrary, but the only thing that's kind of more arbitrary than DUA is use types. Just because when it comes down to it, people say, well, I like duplexes there, or I like condos there, or I like multifamily there. Those can be at any range of densities. You could have a duplex built at 20 dwelling units per acre, or you could have condos built at, I don't know, like 1 dwelling unit per acre. It's just one condo building on like a 20-acre parcel, right? So I was kind of cajoling everybody into getting to this just because it ties everything to an objective standard. Because a lot of times in many of these conversations, people are talking about something and everybody's like nodding their head. Oh yeah, I agree. Character. We want to focus on character, but character is undefinable. So for one person, character is a tree house in a redwood tree. For another person, a character is like a 5-story walk up with a view of the ocean or something. And both people think they're in agreement, but they're not. So I would say that getting to dwelling units per acre ties everything to an objective standard that everybody can look at in the same way. So with that, I will try to share my screen. Okay. Can people see a house?
Yes.
Okay. So all we wanted to do is we just wanted to throw out just some examples of what different densities look like in Girdwood, with the end goal of encouraging everybody to think about what you want your land use categories for residential to look like in terms of dwelling units per acre. Because if you just say, oh, well, we're cool with condos, or we're cool with duplex, or we're cool with fourplex, it gets harder when you get to the regulatory stage because you get to things like lot size minimums. Minimum lot size is theoretically supposed to manage density. But if you don't have a number for density, it just becomes this arbitrary number. So I'll just kind of flip through some of these just to get an idea. And again, I'm a planner. I work in this stuff. I don't have a good concept either of how many dwelling units per acre is. I just know that 6 is not that many, 50 is a lot, but we're not even getting really to those ranges. So this is 3.4 dwelling units per acre, big house on a kind of medium lot. This 3.5 dwelling units per acre. This 4.7 dwelling units per acre. 6.7. I think this is actually a duplex.
I think it's a little delayed.
You are
Oh, is
you're
it?
going way faster than Zoom.
Okay.
So if you
All
could
right.
if you could even start back as the first one again, that would be great.
Okay. So does everybody see the house with the triangle framing in the wood and a little statue up front?
Yes.
Okay. So this is 3.4 dwelling units per acre. I think it's maybe a 12,000 square foot lot. It's a single unit, right? So that's what it can look like. You could also have the same density with a much smaller house on the same lot. Now I'll go to the next one. This is a probably similar sized, maybe house, 3.5 dwelling units per acre. And again, it's all I'm doing here is I'm looking at the size of the lot, looking at how big an acre is, how many of those lots could fit in an acre, and just doing the math for 1 unit or 2 units. So this next one is obviously it's higher density, but really it's just a kind of a smaller house on even a smaller lot. But when it looks like this, you're getting already to 5 dwelling units per acre. And that's the other thing too, is some people say, oh, 5 dwelling, that's way too dense. But I don't really, looking at this, I think most people would say that's really not that dense. That's fine, right? Here's another example. So this is similar to the houses we've seen before. If everybody can see it, it's a wood house with a white first floor and a sort of balcony. This, according to assessment register, is a duplex. So of course, in a duplex, your density goes up. So this would be, 3 point something, but because there are 2 units, you get 6.7 dwelling units per acre. So if we are talking about, and you say, yeah, I'm cool with, up to 7 dwelling units per acre, it could look like this. This could be what that looks like. Here's another example, 7.3 dwelling units per acre. Again, it's kind of a smaller house on a bit of a smaller lot, but this could look very different. If this house was much bigger, people would say, they might say, oh, that looks really dense, or you look like this. It doesn't look that dense. Here's another one. This is a triplex. It's the sort of 2 little houses that are bigger on top than below. This is 10.4 dwelling units per acre. This is kind of complicated because it's really just the garage with the moose antlers and the house behind it, but it's a duplex. But it's a really skinny, narrow lot. But this is 12 dwelling units per acre. So this is more dense than a lot of Anchorage than a lot of Girdwood. But I think a lot of people would also say, oh, this is very characteristic of Girdwood. So that's where it becomes difficult because people say, oh, that's too dense for Girdwood. We don't have that kind of density. Well, these are all examples from Girdwood. Here's 14 dwelling units per acre. And this is an old lot. This was platted in I think the 70s or something. But so, yeah, some people say, oh, 12 to 15, that's way too much. This is what it looks like. This one, 18.6 dwelling units per acre, which again, it's a big lot. And each of these, I believe, is a 4-plex. So this kind of measure allows you to sort of have a bit of flexibility. You can have smaller lots with maybe a smaller building, or a bigger lot with normal sized buildings, or a massive lot with really big buildings. And you sort of maintain this dwelling units per acre number. And then this one is 35 dwelling units per acre. And it's actually, there are a lot of units in here, but it's on a 1 acre lot. So there's a big parking lot on the back side. Of course, this is all from Street View. So things might be a little bit different on the ground. If they are, my apologies. Okay, so I will stop sharing. Okay. So does anybody have any questions about that?
Or reactions or ideas? Looks like we'll start with Grace and then we'll go to Mike.
So Daniel, when we talk about low density versus high density, when you say low density, are you saying single family home development?
I'm going to deflect and say, I'm just saying low density, which that's kind of what I'm getting at.
That's the whole point, is that we're having a hard time. We want to start defining that a little bit more.
Okay, because when in the world I work in, which I'm a real estate residential developer, multifamily infill, historic. I'm going to say that on a half an acre lot in a somewhat defined, centralized area of any community in the Pacific Northwest today that has over the size of Anchorage. Today, you could put on a half an acre lot, you could put 200 units of housing on a half an acre lot. Low grade parking, above grade 4 to 5 floors of above grade housing with retail on the bottom. That is the classic model today of what we call a 5/2. And you see that happening in ski resorts, you see that happening in urban settings, and you even see that in secondary and tertiary communities all over the country. And that's density. So, I am very respectful, or like to think I would like to be, when I look at our community of Girdwood, we're at a very organic development mode. What has been, the hot and top, the mining roads, what is the Cabana land, what is Timberline, what is the Upper Mountain, even where I live off of LAX Highway, it's a very organic feel to how Girdwood has developed at this present time. But I think what we're talking about for the community is the properties that haven't been developed. The land that we're talking about potentially called Holton Hills, or the many thousands, I mean, literally thousands of acres that HLB currently holds in their bank, and what does that mean for the community of Girdwood in the future? So when we talk about density, I am all for more density. And I am talking about density at the rate that I just talked about. I mean, when you just said 50 units is a big building, no, 50 units is not a big building. We have a need in our community, I think from any number of our numerous committees could agree that's a minimum right now of well over 200 to as up to 400 people or units that are in that are of need for our community, whether they're workforce housing, whether they're people that can afford market rate housing, but we have a need. And some of that is apartments, some of that is more, let's say, affordable workforce level, maybe 120 to 150% of the AMI in the community. But we haven't even begun to talk that. So if we're going to talk of density, I am definitely, let's talk density, because I love density. I think that's where we need to be talking about. I think we need to talk about, I mean, if we want to respect our creeks and our trails and our backyard park, the more density we have, the more respectful we can be to those areas. So I look forward to having that conversation with everybody. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
You can tell me with the same brush as Daniel, I love DUA calculations. I was going to ask Daniel, did you include ADUs or not? Because they're not technically. That's another argument. Yeah, I mean, I did something roughly similar to this when I looked at sort of existing patterns, and we're somewhere around about like the neighborhoods I think of as low density, which is Sella Valley, Asker Basin, is the area I am. It practically is about 5 or 6 DUA. And then some areas out towards the mine roads are lower, that's sort of close to 2 or 3, and areas up towards the resort, you know, in the dozens, or probably say 50, 60, that sort of area. I'm not sure that really is the metric we should be getting at now. That's definitely something that has to come through zoning. But I think, you know, deciding whether it should be 11 or 8 or 14 as that being the barrier between lowish and medium, probably, because I don't think, although we're calling it high density, I don't think we are talking about, you know, a large area of 200 DUA. We're talking about maybe individual buildings, which are, you know, 40 units or 30 units, that sort of size, but we're not talking about extremely large numbers. So really it's about medium density, and it's not urban core density. It's medium density and lower density. But we also don't have, in policies which have been, I think, fairly well agreed and adopted, our general policies are we're not having single family anywhere. Everything is at least, well, in fact, now we don't have single family zoning. Everything allows at least a duplex if the lot is the right size. But I think in our current policies, it's up to triplex, and I think ADUs are also allowed. So really we're talking about, you know, low density is probably a bit more than we have now in sort of what we'd consider, you know, maybe 50 to 100% more than we have now in our current lower density areas. And high density is above that. And I don't think we need to be that specific. I think that's something that comes out of zoning, or when we do the discussion of rezoning.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think we just want to make sure that when we do talk about these two different residential land use categories, that that everybody is just like clear about what that means. And the narrative will accompany the map, and we'll describe that in more detail with graphics and images and that sort of thing. I think we wanted to have the conversation so that we made sure we reflected that the right way. So, okay, we're gonna go to Crystal first. Before we only have less than 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure everybody has a chance to talk. So we'll get to you again, Grace, but I want other people to talk on the topic first. So go ahead, Crystal.
So I had a kind of more specific question about the high density residential that is, can we project the map there? It's like it's the high residential or high density residential on the left hand side of Alyeska Highway. Yeah. Yes, yep, right there. So my question is is high density, even though I am a supporter of high density being identified. I am very happy to see the Holton Hills area be identified as mixed use, because I think that is going to be where we probably should plan for density. There's no neighbors there. And then, but the, so that high density residential, my question is there's no public water over there. So what is realistic for high density when we don't have public water? So like really the highest density that you could do is, you know, what wells would need the proper separation, you know, between and such. So I just don't see that as going real high density, because you've got the well water issue to deal with, and until water being brought on this side of the valley, it's a constraint.
Bree, do you want to dig into that at all, or?
I guess, is that if the water weren't a restriction in the future, would that also impact your thoughts on the land use of that area, or is that really what's driving your concern? I just wonder,
I think that's my primary concern is, you know, basically everybody there would be reliant on a private well, and then making sure that, you know, I know, like, especially when you got septic systems involved, right? You need to be 100 feet away from a septic system. And so I'm sure there's septic systems down in the mine roads too. So that's going to impact that side of it. We do have public sewer, but we don't have water. And so it's just something to consider, that it's not really an ideal spot for density when we don't have a major public infrastructure in place.
Thanks, Crystal.
And I don't see it. I mean, I think this plan is supposed to project us 10 years, and I know it's 20 years into the future, but right now there's zero plan to bring in water to this side of the valley. So it just doesn't seem like it's something that would definitely happen in the next 10 years. Also, I just want to say I'm really happy to those vegetative buffers, and I'm wondering if we're going where it can be specified how large the buffer is. Thanks.
Yeah. No, I think we do it kind of gets into the development reserve thing, where even if there are areas that don't have the infrastructure necessary for that specific land use, we want to identify what you would want to see there if the infrastructure were available in the future. So I think but that is a great point you make, that in the near term that's not a realistic land use. So maybe that's something that could potentially be developed further out from then. And then for those, we did add these vegetative buffers. That's actually a great thing to bring up related to residential, because we received comments about adding vegetative buffers around existing residential areas. So that's what's shown in there now. And right now we're not identifying a width in the map itself, but it is something we could describe in the narrative. So we'd be interested in hearing comments on that, if you have a specific width you'd like to see, or at least something you'd like the vegetative buffer to achieve.
Just off the top of my head, I'd like to throw in a 100-foot buffer would be a minimum for me.
Thanks, Crystal. Okay, go ahead, Larry.
Actually, infrastructure cost is what's going to, is going to rule or control development. So allowing for a moderate increase in densities in existing neighborhoods is probably a good idea, just because if what the community is looking for to some degree, at least the permanent residents, is allowing workforce housing or people of lesser means to be able to buy into the community. The only way you're going to be able to do that is by having a having the development costs be able to be spread over more dwelling units. And the same is true in new land, as you show over there on the far side of the valley, that the developer, a developer has to come along and want to buy that land. If you have it as a low density space, they won't look at it or they might, but then you're going to get McMansions out of the whole deal because if you control it by low density and you can't really maximize your infrastructure investment, or you're going to end up with very high priced housing. So I commend you on the looking at upping the density in some of those undeveloped lands, because if the community wants to provide some place for our expansion to take place at on properties that haven't been developed yet, then that's really the only way I think it's going to happen. Thanks.
Thanks, Larry. Okay, Grace, last question or comment.
Larry is so spot on. I mean, he's such a brilliant resident of our community, and thank you for saying that, because literally, we have a project right now before us, the Holton Hills. It was last night I spoke against it at the assembly, and that project is all about a public subsidy to the infrastructure that is going to bring potentially 59 lots to bear in Girdwood with multi-million-dollar properties that will not address our community needs. And I'm hoping that this exercise that we're getting through or doing right now at Imagine Girdwood, and subsequently the GBOS and other committees that are working on bringing solid community-based ideas forward, will have a chance to have some impact in the future of this community. But literally, as I was going to say, it's all about where is the money coming for that infrastructure. The infrastructure monies that we're talking right now are going to be bared by the citizenry of the municipality of Anchorage, because in the development agreement of the Holton Hills, the city of Anchorage is on the hook to bring all the utilities for that subdivision and the development into the further parcels that even Alyeska is looking at. So I think we need to be aware that that is a reality, and it will hopefully, we need to see some growth here in our community because we're struggling. But workforce housing, affordable housing, and other mixed use housing needs to be present in any future public lands that we disperse. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. I'm assuming Amanda's running the meeting now, right? Amanda, if it's okay with you, I'd just like to wrap up this part of the discussion and then have you close us down. Does that sound good?
That would be great. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so Bree, hey, you can shake your head. I think this was really helpful for us. This was good discussion for us to have. This is gonna help Daniel and Bree and Peyton kind of move this next version of the draft land use plan forward. It's also going to help us start working on implementation actions that will end up in the narrative of the plan. So our intent, I think, what do we have? We have another meeting in 2 weeks, right? Right? Is it 2 weeks from now? Yeah.
The 24th, sorry.
Oh yeah, okay, 2 weeks. So we will likely have more discussion items at that point, because remember, we are working to have an actual draft full plan ready for you by the end of February. So at some point, what needs to happen is we're just going to get a draft out the door, and then you'll be responding to the draft. But we're going to use this next meeting to kind of talk a little bit more about items like this as we need to get the draft out the door. Okay, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Holly and the Huddle team, Daniel, for putting together this presentation tonight and coming in for this special meeting, and everyone for showing up and giving their comment. Moving on to agenda items, let's see, is this for tonight? The 10th, yep, okay. I guess you just did your preview of the implementation actions. We're gonna do that on the next meeting because we don't have time.
Yeah, I mean, us listening to you talk about the things that we need more input on is like us starting to work through that. So
copy.
Yeah,
okay.
there'll be more next time for sure.
We will give some time for public comment. These are for items not otherwise on the agenda. So we talked about a lot of things tonight and we don't want to revisit them right now. This is going to be limited to 3 minutes. Does anyone have additional public comment? Okay. Now hearing none. Our next meeting is, like Holly said, in 2 weeks, Wednesday, January 24th at 6 p.m. followed by our next regular meeting, which is Wednesday, February 28th at 6 p.m. The meeting in January 24th, we will hold elections. You have to be a voting member to be nominated and hold office for our board. And we would love to have you all come out and be on the board. So please show up. And otherwise, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Mike.
I'll second.
Thanks, Erin. Have a great night.